Hi, today we are going to discuss the second prose piece prescribed for 12th grade students from the textbook Flamingo. The title of this prose piece is Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood. Before going into the details of this chapter, a few words about its author. It's authored or written by an Indian author named Anish Jain. The most important factor about its author is that she happens to be an Indian writer. I think it's no hyperbole to say that she inherited or she got this literary tradition from her own parents. That means both of her parents were renowned scholars and poets. So I think it's no hyperbole to say that she inherited this literary talent from her own parents. This literary talent was something ingrained in her very blood and bones. And moreover, she is a very close observer of the condition of the surroundings of the country. She travels through big cities and rural parts of India, copiously documenting the stories of dozens of children. And even our present prose piece is no exception. Even in this, as a globetrotter, she goes on to talk about the condition of poor children, having visited different parts of this country. Anish Jain analyzes the grinding poverty prevailing in India. She describes the factual events and situations of misery concerning the poor children. She describes the miserable condition in which the poor children live. Our present prose piece, that is Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood, is an excerpt from her own book, the title of which is Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood. It has got two parts, but today in this video we shall concentrate only on the first part, that is Sometimes I Find a Rupee in the Garbage. Now what happens in the first part? Let's get going. Let's see. I'll narrate everything in my own language, and then you can go and read it for yourself to have a better and thorough understanding of the text. The first part of this account, that is Sometimes I Find a Rupee in the Garbage, is about a poor rag picker whose name is Sahib, who scrounges the garbage dumps on the streets of Delhi for his daily wages. Anish observed Sahib digging the garbage dumps in her neighborhood every morning. Now, who was this Sahib? Sahib was a young boy. Basically, he was from Dhaka, but natural calamities had, driven his family to Delhi to secure a living. He was very poor, very, very poor, and in a miserable condition. He scrounged the garbage dumps because he had nothing better to do. The writer suggested that he go to school. See, that's what we read in the text. You may read it for yourself, but let me just point it out. Go to school, I say glibly, realizing immediately how hollow the advice must sound. Don't you think the same thing happens even in our practical lives? Sometimes when we come across any beggar begging, we tell him, don't you have any job to do? Why don't you go and work? Why don't you go and earn your own livelihood? But sometimes we do not realize that in most of the cases, no one would employ them or him, or no one would give them any work. This is what happens even in our practical lives. The same thing happened even in the case of this writer, that is Anish Jain. She jokingly asked him to go to school, to go and study. Although he insisted, that means Sahib insisted that his neighborhood had no school, and then she made a promise. Anish Jain, the narrator, the writer, made a promise that she would build a school. Now, although this promise was not made seriously, it was made in a joking way, jokingly. But after some days, we read that Sahib came running, asking whether the school was ready, and this put the writer Anish Jain in an embarrassed condition. She was embarrassed because she knew that she had made a promise that was not actually meant, or in other words, she had made a promise light-heartedly. Then as the story goes on, we understand that the writer Anish Jain found out his name. His name was Sahib Alam, which ironically means the Lord of the Universe. This is something completely in contrast to the practical condition of Sahib. It was something that he would never know. He would never know the meaning of his name as the Lord of the Universe. And even if he knew, he would have a very hard time believing it. He would never believe that, he can be the Lord of the Universe. as the time goes by, as the months passed, as the days rolled into months, we read that Anis Jung grew to recognize each of the rag pickers by name. She started calling them by name. Once she asked one of them why he was not wearing chappals. Now, what was his response? What was his answer? He said that it is because his mother had not given them, or she had not taken them down from the shelf. Then another boy, second boy who was listening to this conversation, he said that even if she would have given them, he would have thrown them off. And then a third boy who had never owned a pair all his life, he expressed his desire to have a pair of shoes. So you can understand that all these children are very poor, they're in a very miserable condition. Then we read that Anis Jung noticed numerous children walking barefoot, and she was told that it is not out of poverty that they live barefoot. Actually, it is out of tradition. It is their tradition to live barefoot. But then we read that Anis Jung wonders that if this is only an excuse to explain away a perpetual state of poverty. This is the exact expression used in the text. Perpetual state of poverty means a never-ending state of poverty. So she thinks it may not be actually the tradition. Actually, it is their poverty, and in order to hide their poverty, they say that it is the tradition that makes them live barefoot. Then she is reminded of a man from Udupi who had once told her that as a young boy he would go to school past an old temple where his father was a priest. And he would stop at the temple and pray for a pair of shoes. 30 years later, she revisited the town. Who revisited the town? Anis Jung revisited the town, which was by then a deserted place. In the backyard of the temple, where the new priest now lived, was a red and white. There were a few chairs of the color red and white chairs were kept. Then there she noticed a young boy dressed in a grey uniform, wearing socks and shoes, who had returned from school. Now, looking at that boy, she remembered the prayer of gratitude of the other boy, when he had finally got a pair of shoes. The goddess had granted his prayer. That's what she was reminded of. But again, she says that while boys like the son of the priest now wore shoes, there were many others who did not have a pair of shoes. Then she goes on to talk about the life in Simapuri. She says, in the text, she puts it. She says that my acquaintance with the barefoot rag pickers leads me to Simapuri, and she says that it is a place on the periphery of Delhi, yet miles away from it metaphorically. It is to say that although the place is very close to Delhi, but metaphorically, that means the people of Simapuri are far away from the facilities that are enjoyed by people of Delhi. It was in complete contrast to the life of people in Delhi. The dwellers of Simapuri were actually illegal occupants. That's what we read. They were illegal occupants from Bangladesh who had come there back in 1971. And then she talks about, the different families that lived there. Sahib's family was one of them that lived. There were about, more than, what does she say? She says that, live 10,000 rag pickers. So in Simapuri, about 10,000 rag pickers lived, and Sahib's family was one among them. And then she says that the place had numerous structures of mud with roofs of tin and tarpaulin, and lacked basic amenities like sewage, drainage, or running water. And then she says that a lot of families lived, for how many days? For more than 30 years they had been living there. But without legal permit. They only had their names on ration cards that got their names on on voters list and enabled them to buy grain. Then she says that even it was very difficult for them to buy food, to get food. Food was all the more important to them, and that is why wherever they found food, they just pitched their tent. Then she says that she was interacting with a group of women who were in tattered saris, and they said that if at the end of the day they can feed themselves and their children, that is everything that they want. They don't want the beauty of the place or natural beauty, they just want to feed themselves. And then we read that even the children were the partakers of this struggle for survival as rag pickers. And then we read that one morning Anis noticed Sahib looking at a tennis court where two young men dressed in white were playing tennis. And Sahib was actually he wore worn out tennis shoes that must have been given to them by someone. But although this shoes looked in quite contrast to his appearance, but it was actually one who had always walked barefoot. Even this pair was something much to him, to a fellow like him. He liked the game, and sometimes he even went to the park to swing when no one was around. And as the climax of this part come, we read that one morning, Anish Jung, she noticed Sahib on his way to milk booth with a steel canister, with a steel container. He had got hold of a job actually in a tea stall where he would be paid 800 rupees, that's what we read, and was given his meals. But sad to say that in the last line of this first part we read, the bag was his. Which bag? The garbage bag. The canister belongs to the man who owns the tea shop. That means the steel canister does not belong to him. Sahib is no longer his own master. That means he has lost his freedom. Actually, he no longer looked carefree, but he looked burdened with the responsibility of a job. So see, it is quite ironical. Although as a rag picker he was quite poor, and this present condition when he got this job was something much better. He could earn some money, but he had lost his carefree look. He had lost his freedom. I think this has to be interpreted in a very different way also. Sometimes it is freedom that matters a lot. Sometimes it is freedom that matters much to many people rather than money and so many other things. We will analyze this part as well as the next part in a critical way in our next video after completing the next part. Meantime, if you have any question, please feel free to ask me in the comment section. Thanks for watching.